Give our pastor time to get himself together before you go into your sermon. You know, just need some quiet time. I say we got, so we're gonna have that time, and some people go pick up people. You gotta give them time. Sunday school ends at 9:45. You try to stay. Brother Fennell.
Make it so convenient. Everything is irritating. Yeah, well, it was like clockwork. It was like clockwork.
I know.
Sometimes, well, clockwork get you. Well, seems like we've been in Isaiah coming up. We just talked about Jeremiah. We talked about all the prophets. Now we're coming to the end of this journey. Seems like it took them a long time to get there. And the thing about it stuff is, boy, look him. Throughout all of this, they still doing the same thing. Same thing. Still being disobedient, still sinning, still getting all the warning from the prophets, about, hey, what you need to do, following God's word and stuff. But the thing about it is, we talked last week, talking about Jeremiah 38 and stuff, and about how, he suffered like most prophets did and stuff, who tried to bring that unadulterated word of God. Sometimes when you do things, you do it for the Lord, you want to say, Lord, why am I catching it so bad, when you was working for the devil and stuff, the devil was trying to get you, and once he had you, he didn't mess with you no more and stuff, so it's no different when you're working for the Lord, because the devil don't want you to be fruitful no more so than God do, because both of them want the bodies. They can get bodies, control the mind, and they can keep your agenda going. Judah taken captive. The thing about this lesson, like most of the previous ones stuff, it's almost hard to talk about Judah, Southern Kingdom, without talking about all the rest of the 10, that didn't stay across, the river. So, basically you're still talking about Judah, and Judah. They still, major characters and stuff. Judah taken captive. He brought Jerusalem and Judah so angered the Lord that he expelled them from his presence. 2 Kings 24:20. Now, boy, you got to do something wrong, boy, when nobody want to look at you. Well, again, you ever sat down sometime when that same fun time of raising kids, sometimes they can make you mad so go and do something. I can remember my baby brother and stuff, we went out of town with my parents to come back, and everybody in town was talking about my brother trying to hold up the train. Told the people down the railroad track with a 22 rifle, don't move the train, And boy, my daddy, we got back home, my daddy was so mad, he said, go find him. I had to sit down there, told my brother, I said, well, Dad ain't gonna do nothing to you, he just want you to come home. And boy, as soon as he came through the door, he yoked it, upside the head. Broke my belt, his belt, and my brother's belt. He was so mad, I said. And finally, Pastor, my daddy was 6 feet, 245 pounds, and I tried to put my arm around him and say, cool down there, hey, told brother, I said, young. Sometimes when you got a zeal, you want people to do right and stuff. And the thing about the God we serve, God would hope that we would do things decent and order. We know sometimes, but it don't always come out like that. And you figure, chastising somebody, that should make them, not so much to just cripple them or destroy it in most cases, but a lot of times, God chastises people just to try to get their attention, try to get them to see the errors of their ways and stuff, and then you sit down, you start listening to say, well, maybe they get the picture, maybe they won't and stuff, but it seemed like Judah, especially Judas, is still the one left and stuff, because now stuff, the northern kingdom had already been taken into exile, so they already done went through what was just prophesied about Judah. Look, if you don't get right, same thing will happen to you, to your brothers before you and stuff, You're gonna get you're gonna get taken to the next side. But the fun thing about these lessons, most lessons we're studying stuff is that this was something that God allowed. You know, I think we take for granted the stuff that, God is still in control. Even when, he may use a human element to carry his plan and stuff, it's still God who's still the one who's in control. He still got the defining moment in this particular time and stuff. You had Judah and Jerusalem both being disobedient to the law of God, and both of them being unfaithful, on the part of people. And I think we done talked about 3 or 4 lessons now about bad rule, ungodly people, godly rule, godly people, everything went just like posted. Well, Judah's particular case, they still up under an ungodly rule, who basically, didn't want to heed the word of God, didn't pay no attention to the word of God. He chose to, to go the route of apostasy, do everything under the sun that was against what God wanted them to do and stuff, Zedekiah, like we learned before and stuff, when he, last week talking about Jeremiah being put down in the pit, find out and stuff last week that, hey, he allowed the influence of the nobleman and stuff to cause him to throw Jeremiah in the pit. And now here it is and stuff, the same thing. He's listening to these itching ears, got prominent people, and the nobility whispering in his ear and stuff, because, still nothing changed. Jeremiah told him what? Look, God told me to tell you, you might well go ahead on and surrender to the Babylonians, okay? You can't win. But at least if you surrender, you may be carried into captivity, but you're going to live. If you try to go against them and don't surrender, you can't win the battle. You can't defeat them, in a military battle and stuff, And of course, like sometimes we do, human beings got a funny, fickle nature. We don't want nobody to tell us nothing. If you got your opinion about something, boy, look here, somebody have to just shoot you and beat you across the hand, across the head and stuff. And guess what? It still ain't gonna change, what it is you think if that situation. Because that thing about being adults, learning to agree and disagree agreeably, that don't always work in the case too. So here was Zedekiah. Still, even though, like Pastor said last week, he had a rapport with Jeremiah. Used to talk. They had several conversations where they done got together and talked about things. But he still, I ain't gonna listen to what you saying. I'm gonna do it my way and stuff, So he sat down. He allowed the noblemen and people of influence to influence him to go against what Jeremiah had brought him from the word of God and stuff. Few basically surrender. The thing about not surrendering and stuff, if you're in a win-win situation, if you got a 50-50 chance of winning and stuff, you may have a little leeway, but they had no leeway. Up front, the Chaldeans, aka Babylonians, was very astute at committing sieges against, cities and stuff. They done perfected it. They knew exactly how long it would take and where it would take and what it was going to do. Because the ultimate aim was to do one thing: starve the people out. If you ain't got no water and you ain't got no food, eventually a smart man or a smart woman, whoever in charge, you say, hey, look, run up that white flag. Run up that white flag. Yeah, look, people hungry. We talked about Jeremiah last week and stuff where he was dying in the pit, in the mud, and they hollered about, well, they got no bread to feed, Jerusalem at this time, basically to the point where they were just about no food, no nothing. They had caught a break. We didn't really, put a lot of emphasis on it last week and stuff about how temporarily the siege was halted because the Babylonians were a little fearful of Egypt, in the army of Egypt. So
they heard Egypt
was
coming. So
making a little. So basically, it's like, all right, let's hold this up for a minute and stuff. Let's take a couple, 2 or 3 months and They ain't going nowhere. We're going to leave a remnant of our army still surrounding the city, so they can't go nowhere. And the point about it is, if you look at the topography of Jerusalem itself and stuff, and Zedekiah, they all knew just what Jerusalem consisted of. You basically got the south, the west, and the east. With little to nothing there and stuff, that ain't nobody going out there. You got desert, you're going down a 3,000-foot drop, going back down towards the sea. So, when you look at it, if somebody was going to conquer them, they knew one thing. They was going to come from the north. Because the north was the way, to get to them. One of the things happened on the way, that they used to have a little saying, used to come on TV and stuff, 7 o'clock every night. The funny thing happened on the way to the forum, that old thing. Might be a little for your time, because I was about 20 when he used to show that all the time. Little thing like the gladiators in the Rome said, a funny thing happened on the way to the forum, the Christians got caught up with the lions. It was like a little joke, in the 70s, as a sitcom. But they also knew that they had to come through the north. And funny thing about this stuff is, even though Judah was surrendered, because of their stiff-necked king, the thing about this stuff is, you can talk about Zedekiah, name being changed from minister, whatever name was, by Nebuchadnezzar. But you have to understand one thing. The same person who had instituted the first siege against, Jerusalem was Nebuchadnezzar. The same man who was instituting the second siege, And see, the thing about it is, when you get kind of cocky, so the first siege against Jerusalem kind of fizzled out. It didn't work. Because I think last week we talked about Jerusalem had one Christine that could hold up to 2 million gallons of water, So Jerusalem had some things. Previous leaders had made sure Jerusalem was one of the few cities, especially when you got siege. If you want to see somebody with a history in modern times comparable to what Jerusalem went through, was being sacked so many times. Seemed like everybody wanted to go slap Jerusalem in the head and take over Jerusalem, Every war, people always went. The Romans went through Jerusalem. Hannibal, all of them go the same way, the same route. That's the same thing that happened in modern era with Poland. Everybody who wanted to start a world war, at some point or another, they decided, we're going to start the war from Poland. Go through Poland and spread out. The Russians did it. The Germans did it. Everybody did it. Went through Poland. So, you got the leaders had made some defensive changes to Jerusalem, put up some extra walls and stuff. Hezekiah, discussion talking about the 2 walls and stuff, where Zedekiah and his troops wouldn't surrender, listen to the bad advice. People hungry, people starving, famine done set in, so everybody hungry, everybody starving, nowhere to go. But they decided in the dead heat of night, hey, I don't know what you call it, the cow in the military. I know they would have got shot. You pull something like that. In the dead heat of the night, the king and his whole army knocked a hole through the wall adjacent to the king's garden. And I was studying this last night and stuff, and one wall was there. Hezekiah, when he, was in charge, had another wall built in close proximity to the king's garden. So it was between these 2 walls and gates where they decided to knock a little hole. Funny thing about it, Eddie, remember I told you we're going to get comfortable which way we're going to come in the north? Well, this thing was on the southern side of Jerusalem. And this is where, because it was not a key area, you had spots, Babylonian troops there and stuff, So when you can sneak the whole army in the king, knock a hole through a wall, and they all get out and stuff. When daybreak come, you left all your people. People hungry, starving, and you gone. Sometimes we do a lot of things, in the name of the Lord and stuff. A lot of excuses. People made a lot of excuses about Zedekiah. Everybody made excuses about the fact. Well, maybe he, because he was a bastard king. We talked last week about being a bastard king. That hey, he really didn't have no authority. If Nebuchadnezzar told him to jump, only thing he asked was how high, you know? He really didn't have no power. And plus, he had took over for his nephew, who no sooner he got in there, he was gone, you know? And the Babylonians had deported him, so he didn't stay there months before he took over. Nebuchadnezzar changed his name to Zedekiah and told him basically what he wanted to do. And then if he wanted to stay, you know, he had to do it. And the thing about when you got to follow somebody else's instructions and stuff, the word tells us and stuff that man can tell you what to do all day long and stuff, but if you follow God, you can't go wrong. Good or bad, God gonna still be with you. Zedekiah forgot about who's in charge, you know. He forgot about that all the conquering armies, you know, throughout the children of Israel's history and stuff. The only way they had success and stuff was if God turned his hand away from him, you know, and left him unprotected. But as long as God had his hand on his people, nobody could touch him. Zedekiah forgot about all of that and stuff. You know, he was more intent on doing it himself and stuff. But because of influence from other people, he thought he could hold out. And the funny part about it and stuff is about this whole thing about the last siege. They didn't expect it to take no 2+ years, Because normally this was a quick thing, you know. Hey, total bombardment all day long, you know. Hey, them little swinging little fiery rocks, you know, hitting against the wall. But that's how they had destroyed Jerusalem, you know, later on by just completely bombing night and day. People couldn't go nowhere, and the perfect acts of siege did just what they're designed to do. Nobody could get in, nobody could get out. No goods could get out, and no goods could come in. But when they had that little reprieve, you know, they're messing with the Egyptians, they had a chance to restock, you know. Some supplies came in, some resupply came in and stuff. So it took them 30 months until Nebuchadnezzar could actually, you know, waltz in Jerusalem, you know. And the funny thing about it is, you know about being a good leader. Even though Zedekiah thought they had the time to get a little distance, the distance they were going to try to escape in the direction it was going in encompassed all of 300 miles. One going to never make it. So no sooner they got a short period away from the city and stuff, you know. Not only did his men scatter, he basically was a king left to fend for himself. And like most kings and stuff, you know, the dying breed who always try to hang with him through thick and thin was his sons. His sons stuck with it. And the first thing, the Babylonians, you have to understand one thing about the Babylonians. The Babylonians was kind of, and the Romans picked up a whole lot of stuff that they did later on in life. Romans never crucified people. That was something they picked up from the Syrians, you know, the Babylonians, but the Romans never did that, you know. But it seemed like an effective way for somebody to die, you know, because it took a long time hanging on the cross to really die. And the whole while you hanging, you suffer, you know. The only relief you got to suffer was where somebody nailed both your feet together there on the cross. Then in order for you to catch your breath, you had to physically lift your upper torso up just to get a breath for you. And when you look at all that weight on your feet, you know, it's a cruel way to die and stuff. But the simple fact was, because they knew it was effective. First thing they did to Zedekiah, you know, when he got caught, was, how about for effect? Hey, Babylon was playing for effect. You know, it was a visual show. First of all, they killed all of his sons in front of him. They killed all of the prominent citizens of Judea around him, you know. So you're looking at everybody you know, including your sons, all dying, you sitting there looking. And then after they let you look and see all the people die, then the next thing they do is they take your eyes out. So the last thing you see, my son dying, my friends dying, people, you know, that I trust dying and stuff, you know. And then on top of that, get some bronze shackles. Kind of remind me of Samson with Delilah, you know. They didn't kill him, but they took him back to Babylon, you know, in handcuffs, you know, eyes all out, you know. And so for effect, it let everybody else know, you rebel against us, this is what you're going to get. But sometimes, you know, you have to look at the children, youth especially and stuff, because they did obey God. You know, what the prophet was given, Zedekiah, was the divine word of God. It's like if you was a king, the king issued out a decree, I want you to go take down the front of the building and stuff, don't leave nothing standing, every brick, Right, you're going to take, get some men, go take down every brick. Well, God does issue a divine, decree to his people through the prophet to say, do this, you need to surrender. You need to be obedient to the word. Do what thus said the Lord. And I guess if somebody come us today and stuff say, thus said the Lord, unless you totally out of sync, you say, oh look, he coming the right way. He said, thus said the Lord. This ain't something he's saying, it's something that he done. So if he got a spiritual connection and stuff, with God and stuff, he's still able to translate what it was God said. And this was the thing that got Zedekiah, most of the rulers. They say of the 20 years of rule and stuff, the 20 years of the 20 people who ruled, from Hezekiah to Josiah was good. Manasseh started out halfway decent, but then he went to the other side. But everybody else was pure evil. They started out evil, they ended up evil. Josiah, it's strange to look at how a man who was a follower of God is so close connected to God and what he believed and the way he thought and stuff with that. But all of his sons was right to the coast. His brother, Zedekiah, was even worse than his worst son. But these are the people that were leading God, people and stuff, and they had no holiness, no whatsoever. And the thing about it, when you look at the Babylonians were never considered to be a godly, people, okay? It was anything but, But God chose them as his instrument to get his people in line because they're going to get the job done. Sometimes it's good too to go back and reread the story about Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar one rap too tight himself, Eddie. Pastor Monet, myself. Nebuchadnezzar was crazy. Nebuchadnezzar went crazy stuff. He was out there in the desert with lion clothes on and stuff, acting crazy, eating honey, and baying at the moon. God let him stay out there a while and stuff, because he thought one time that he was tougher than God. God let him go through something and then brought him back to his right mind. All right, now I got you, I can use you now. And Nebuchadnezzar was glad to get out that desert, So sometimes, I do know God and Jesus both have a sense of humor. Because some of the things that they do to get people's attention, won't kill you. See, even though Zedekiah and everybody else was steady disobeying the word and stuff, God was always trying to leave them a little wood room. Hey, come on back in the fold. Just come on back in the fold and stuff, And when you look at it and stuff, even doing all these sieges, even Babylon, their greatest, the Babylonian Empire didn't last 75 years. All the stuff they know for in 75 years, it was gone and forgotten. All they did to Egypt, all they did to Mesopotamia and all them other folks, it was gone. Like it had never existed. And all this encompassed all about 75 years when they actually done it. You start out and you run quick, but you don't all to the end. And the thing that we have to understand too is that because what Jeremiah brought to them was a divine, intervention from God for them to do certain things. It wasn't like when they refused to surrender, it wasn't like they slapping Nebuchadnezzar in the face. The person they were snapping in the face and stuff by not following what had been commanded was God. They're basically telling God, we ain't listen to you either. You right here want us to surrender, we ain't gonna do that. What come before the fall? Pride. God would take a humble spirit and use it. But if you got that pride and all about, you can't touch me. I ain't gonna do that. I'm all that involved, God will lead you to your own devices and stuff, And basically, because his people when God's response was to send Babylon, lay siege to the city, starve the people in submission. Hey, that part didn't work. Then they decided the last chance was, hey, round them all up. And see, the people that stayed in Judea, that Zedekiah was in charge of, the poor, the sick, the elderly, and the merchants. All the prominent people had already gone. Because they went out during the first siege, because that's when Daniel, the Hebrew boys was already gone, refusing to eat the king's food, See, they was already gone, And so, what they had left was just, for lack of a better word, heard one people say, they were the leftovers. Because, number one, the Babylonians knew that they couldn't make the trip, had to sick when they never made it, So they just left them there. Left them there, for him to be the little puppet king. The father Nebuchadnezzar, rules and stuff, and the people basically were left to their own devices. And like we found out doing Jeremiah being put down in the pit, a lot of that water they had stored up, hey, it turned to mud. Wasn't no water. So, they say you can go without food maybe 3 to 5 days without food. But they say you can't go a 24-hour period if you ain't got no water in it. So you got to have the water, So that's why even in the military, we was trained. I used to look at my people sometimes, they used to act crazy and stuff, I got up every morning with daybreak, and I would walk down to the water buffalo. Didn't just take the stick and play with it. I would open it up and stuff and take the stick and put that in there. They had about 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 cans already full stacked up. I would get my nice little swig from the faucet, and then I would fill up both my canteens, right? And I would go back and I would tell both of my drivers, I say, look here, there's 7 cans down there by the water buffalo. Now you can lay down here sleeping if you want to. If somebody get down there before you get there, you ain't got no 5-gallon cans of water to put in the pack to keep it running. And you ain't got that extra 5-gallon thing of water to have something to drink. So I would look at them, I said, now what y'all gonna do is both of them would jump up and they would throw the shoes on and stuff and run on down there, and they come back with 10 gallons of water with them and stuff. Well, by that time, we put it all in track security in there. Everybody, the whole company to wake up. And what's the first thing that's going on? First Sergeant, we ain't got no water. We ain't got no water. When they gonna come and fill the water buffalo back up? And then everybody would come to me and say, AT, and it take, y'all got no water? No, we ain't got no water. My people look at me and say, Sergeant, been there. Yo, we're finna go through 24 hours of training. The water buffalo is empty. So what you gonna do? You gonna leave that water right there, because 5 gallons, you can't just know it, because 5 gallons going into the engine that's running for 24 hours. So sometimes when you look at how and why people do things and stuff, and a lot of stuff, like I said, God got a sense of humor. When Zedekiah tried to escape, he went the same route that the king before him who would try to rebel. They took the same route when he got caught and killed. So, it's kind of funny, when you end up on the Jericho, coastline, that, hey, you're in the same place that the king before you would try to rebel against the Babylonian and hadn't succeeded. And now here you are, going the same route trying to escape. Sometimes when you do a thing and you do it wrong, it don't always come out, the way you want it, how you want it and stuff, But because Zedekiah did evil in the sight of the Lord, just like Joe Kilmer did and stuff, he had already put himself there. Being 21 years of age, did it have effect on it? Some degree might have changed his thought pattern. But then you look at his dad. Dad was 8 years old. Josiah was 8 years old when he took over his king. At 16, he had saw the light and what it was to serve God and stuff. And by 21, he was tearing down all the high places and all the other idols and stuff, So sometimes age, although it may be a somewhat of a factor, it's not the determining factor why a person decided he wanted to do wrong, you know. God don't always have the last say so. I don't matter, you know, cause now the people of Judah could have been just like you know, the people in the northern kingdom. They could have went through a whole lot more abuse than what they went through and stuff, you know, but God basically didn't take his hand off them. He wanted them to get right. And sometimes I look at the example as black folks. Sometimes, instead of doing right, we got a habit. And I do believe that black folks, in some instances, like to suffer, you know? Because it's well, because for the simple fact is that it's old rules say, he who knows no history is doomed to repeat the same failure over and over. Because if you don't learn something, you just have a look at St. Joe. We know what happened to Pitts and Lee was wrong. We also know that if Billy May Lee had told the truth to start with, Pitts and Lee would never went to jail to start with. You know? Because how can somebody be committing a robbery and killing somebody across the bridge when they're all dying here, you know, plotting and drinking together? See, but then Billy May Lee got told, like she did when left St. Joe for 20 years, Pastor. People told her to get out of town. For 20 years, Billy May Lee left her daughter here, but she was nowhere in town. You know? And see, sometimes when we do things haphazardly because we don't look at the whole picture and stuff, you know. God, no matter how bad human being is, no matter how low Trump can go in some of the stuff he do and some of the stuff he's saying and stuff is, it's still God who's gonna have the final say about what's gonna happen to Trump and how it's gonna happen, you know, and when it's gonna happen. See, right about now, Trump on top of the world. Hey, he think nobody can touch him. You know, he got his own people so scared that they gonna vote for everything he say he want. But remember this, nothing lasts forever. You know, because of cause and effect, because you do this gonna happen. See, at first the people was all elated over the fact that Trump got reelected again and stuff. Who did the people expect Trump to dog out? Who the people Trump was been dogging out? Blacks, Hispanics, Jews, Asians, anybody that's not white. You understand? But then Trump got one thing. All us aliens. Everybody that came to the U.S. came from somewhere else, including your family who sneaked across the border illegally. You know? So how you gonna try to discriminate against certain groups of people because you want to go back to this pure, you know? People forget history part of it. Granddaddy was a KKK, mom and daddy was a KKK, uncles, all of us KKK. Now, if you've been around this all your life, Eddie, what you think you're gonna be? You know, and sometimes when you do a thing and you forget about what it is and why you're doing this stuff, you know, sometimes you forget about stuff don't just happen. You understand? Stuff just don't happen. It took me a long time to figure out that we worried about discrimination. We worried about, you know, equal but just, you know. We done went through all them different phases and stuff. And where we in back up at? Discrimination is just as rampant as it was now, as it was in the 40s and the 50s. And we in 2025. We assumed that because people knew what was right, they was going to do right. All it took was one Trump to come along. All it took was one Hitler in Germany to change everything the German people had ever did. Because Hitler had convinced him, our biggest enemy is that secretary walking around with them long bills and something. And he had a hatred for the Jews, and he spread that hatred to everybody. As a result, 6 million Jews got killed because Hitler said he wanted them off the face of the earth. If Trump could get rid of us, sometime, and this is why when I said Eddie DeMar about you know no history, everybody assumed that Abraham Lincoln freed us. Abraham Lincoln was dead. Harrison was the one who passed the law. You understand? Just like everybody, talk about voting rights act of 1964. Well, guess what? It was Lyndon Baines Johnson who was signing this stuff, that became law in 1965. You understand? So a lot of times it wasn't the people who was actually there while it was going on, it was the people that came behind them who was putting the thing on. Because Abraham Lincoln forte was, if I could find an island off the coast of America where I could put all the black people, I would move them tomorrow. But simple fact, if they ain't here, we have no problem. We have no war. Sometimes we got to look at what's there and what's between you and stuff, Understand one thing about God. God judge his people. But even in judging them, he still didn't give up on them. He still allowed them to maintain that hope that if they will come back and do what they're supposed to do, my mercy, I'm going to give them a hand, And it's funny too, it said, listen, man, he say, God covenant mercy outlasts any human failure. No matter what you think you done wrong and you can't get forgiven for and stuff, God mercy gonna still allow you the chance to say, hey, look, I'm sorry. I was wrong. And sometimes we look at what it is we need to be doing, how we need to do it. Say, if Jeremiah 29:11, something of the best say, I know the plans I have for you to prosper. God isn't going to destroy us, nor he let his desires of plan, go uncompleted. If God said it's gonna happen, God gonna do it. And that's basically what happened with the people in Judah. God, even though they killed the king's sons, blinded the king, burnt the temple, did everything they did, guess what? God already had a plan. That his people was going to come back in the fold and stuff, and they was going to rebuild everything that was destroyed and stuff, and that one day he was going to bring all his people back together. Great lesson, y'all. Like I say, that part about itself in the pod, pretty close on it. I think I went 2 minutes over.
All right.
All right. Well, I'm trying to
people.
Okay. We have yes.
All right. Everybody
Yeah,
pay attention.
That's
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
New Bethel Elementary Church School, Port St. Joe, Florida, Bible Study Revival Class Report, date Sunday, 9 November 2025. Class number 1, teacher present, attendance students joined today, none, visitors none, total present 5, total contribution $50. Bishop Marvin C. Zanders presiding prelate, Reverend Tan C. Moss II presiding elder, Reverend Christopher T. Jordan pastor, Brother Clarence Burnett superintendent, Brother Eddie Fields assistant superintendent. Bible verse: Jerusalem and Judah so angered the Lord that he expelled them from his presence. 2 Kings 24, chapter 21.
55. Okay. Who would like to review today?
We have general discussion.
I was sitting there thinking the whole time that I was getting my thoughts together.
We'll all start off.
It was sounding like Donald Trump. He's starving the people, taking the snap away, people are hungry. I'm saying, well, he seems like he taking siege of the United States. I thought about the people in Gaza, how he's doing those people He's trying to take siege of them, do that. It's amazing when I always, when it's back then, I try to put it here compared to what's going on now with that. And that Donald Trump, I was just writing, as he was going through the lesson, I was flipping the page, different, I just write Trump, because he basically do the same thing. He was saying in there, when we get back to it, when it was saying about that power comes from God. Presidents, prime ministers, chancellors, any heads of state have a responsibility to govern justly and with mercy. Donald Trump is not doing that.
Yeah, you have the last word.
Yeah,
You
well,
want to say
I'm gonna
something?
respond.
You want to respond?
Okay, all right. It can be, you have to be careful. When you look at Jeremiah, because Jeremiah told Zedekiah and the people not to fight Nebuchadnezzar.
Right.
Submit to him, right?
Mhm.
We're seeing a Nebuchadnezzar in the White House. We're seeing Zedekiah in the Senate and in the House, right? We're seeing Jeremiah in the pulpit. So somebody can say that the Democratic side of the White House, of everything, need to surrender to what the king is saying, all right? The flip side of that, somebody else could say something else. So we have to be careful when we're listening to when the Lord has brought this to our attention through study and all of this, because he already knew what was going to be happening when he assigned these lessons and gave people to write, right? There's no, it wasn't a coincidence that this lesson fell on today, right? In the middle of the government shutdown. It was all planned. So we have to be careful that we don't succumb to evil by misinterpreting the word of God, right? And we got to make sure when we do stuff or even speak out on stuff, we're speaking out after the Lord has told us to speak. All right, so we have to be, in other words, what I'm saying is I thought about that. Somebody somewhere is preaching today off of this and saying that's why we need to tie down to a Donald Trump. The Lord had told me that, yeah, right? He gave me that, right? So we have to be careful, right? And not just look at stuff on the surface, right? We got to look at it through all aspects and see, yes, the world has been, we've been going back to the rulers before Zedekiah. Zedekiah was the last part of the cancer, right? How far have we gone back to being disobedient to God, right? So I just said that just to make that general comment. You have to be careful when some people are preaching and teaching right now that Democrats need to bow down because that's what you know. Then somebody else is preaching the Republicans need to bow down because that's what, right? So we have to make sure we're not putting ourselves into the word. We got to make sure we're allowing the word to be in us.
I agree. That's why I said I think it too. I don't agree with surrender. With the way things are now. I don't agree with surrendering because it's evil in the background.
Mm-hmm. So we have to humble ourselves enough not to surrender but be in a humble state to allow God to be God in that situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
be in a position.
I think that's what I was trying to, after you said that, that's what, and that was Zedekiah's problem. Well, I get to that in a moment. I say that, okay, that's the part I said.
I'm gonna talk about it, but you.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
But that's what I was thinking also, you know, when we look at these lessons for us to take a look at ourselves. We can take a look at Trump, we can take a look at Biden, we can take a look at all the our politicians in the world. But these lessons are about God and us, our personal relationship with God, what we can do to follow God's mandate. When Zedekiah was in office, God put Zedekiah there, although the Babylonians put him as a puppet
Yeah.
leader, but God put him there, and he had an opportunity. And Jeremiah told him, he said, look, if you surrender, you will not be killed. The people will not be killed. You know, and he chose not to do that because he didn't listen to Jeremiah. But Jeremiah was a man sent by God. And you have to know when God is sending a message to you. You have to know people who come to you. You know, you can't believe everybody. You pray and you pray about it, and you ask God, and you will know. Now, what he had to do was, what if he would have surrendered, his son would have been alive. All the people, you know, in Jerusalem, they went back into Jerusalem and burned down all the houses, and burned temple, burned everything down. You know, because he was not a good, you know, he did not listen, and that's what we have to listen. When we look at people in the White House now and those things, you know, they'll put their, for God's purpose. God only elevates those who you want to elevate. And that's called elevation in politics, you know, because what we do is for a purpose. Maybe to bring us back into control of whatever, listening to him. So we have
In alignment with
in alignment,
the Lord.
with what he's saying. So these things happen, you know, when, you know, everybody was thinking when Nixon got in there, when Bush got in, and Clinton was in, things he did, you know, and all those things. You know, we think about all those, we can't, but we're not, but you know, those politicians are coming. If this lesson would have been 10 years ago, it would have fit that day because it would have fit something there.
Yeah.
These lessons, you know what I'm saying? It's not just for the day, but we can look at it through the day's eye and what we know. That's why we said we knew now what we knew then. I mean, knew then what we know now. We'd have done better, but you'd have been a total different person, you know, because you'd have changed your ways. It's something like that Back to the Future movies, you know. You can go back and do that. But those things are put there for us to do. When we look in the mirror, when we read these lessons and think about what we can do as leaders, what we can do as people. What are we doing that causes somebody to stray away from God? And not bring them to God. That's when we look at these lessons. Because this is talking about what, I can't even get that, Isaiah the exile. Yeah. You know, so Pastor don't bring all this other stuff out. Anyway, that's it. Let me read this, and then Pastor, you come the last word of November 9th. Just gonna abbreviate it. Report. Total today, 5 total contribution today, $50. The lesson came from 2 Kings 24th chapter, 18th verse to the 25th chapter, 9th verse. Clarence Manette, Superintendent Reverend Christopher Jordan, Pastor. Any corrections on issues? None. Secretary report stand approved. Pastor, send your hand.
Good morning.
Good
To
morning.
everyone. One couple of announcements first. Next Sunday, and I was going to do it today, but then I thought about it. It wouldn't be in the secretary's report. We will reorganize the church school Bible Discovery Hour next Sunday. Right before, after we officially open up and all of that, before it won't take us that long to do it because everybody's going back into their home. But I just want to do it so it'll be in the minute. Interesting. Couple of ways we could have went with this lesson today with my review. Brother made a comment about when we know better, we do better, right? Or better yet, if I'd known then
Yeah, well,
what I know now, I would have did some things different, right? That is a true statement, but you got to. But what we have to realize, there's somebody on the other side that don't believe the Emancipation Proclamation should have ever been signed. So now they're trying to do something different to get it back to wipe off that signature, right? Somebody somewhere don't think voter rights should have been signed, right? So they're trying to do something different, right? When you look at a Trump, he's making the comment, "Make America great again." And the question is, when was America ever great? Yeah. Then the second question is, what are you calling great? Because for our ancestors, it's always been a struggle, right? So you got, so I just say that to say this, everybody's interpretation of the word is always going to be different. And maybe that's what I was trying to get to with the conversation earlier. But we have to take our own personal account of our own stewardship. And that's what I really wanted to focus on in my review. I wanted to focus on Zedekiah, right? I know that the lesson talks about, them in bondage. We mentioned Jeremiah and what he knows, Zedekiah. But when it boils down to this section right here, I believe the key thing is Zedekiah's actions, right? So when we look at Zedekiah, the first thing is Nebuchadnezzar changed his name, right? Nebuchadnezzar, when he put him on the throne, I can't remember how to pronounce his name. It started with an N, Manasseh. But he changed it to Zedekiah, right? Zedekiah means the Lord is righteous, right? Just because somebody changes your name to something, that don't mean you act like your name, right? Because there was no righteousness in him, right? And that's what I want to get at. Just because Trump is saying make America great again, there's no greatness in America with the Trump, right? But some people, right, think America is just great, right where it needs to be at, right? But he changed his name. And when we look at it from that aspect, when we look at it from that time frame, when somebody changed your name, when a king changed the name of somebody, that was them saying that I have authority and you are loyal to me, right? When you look at Daniel, Hananiah, Michelle, and their names was changed to Daniel was changed to Belshazzar, Hananiah to Meshach, Michael to Shadrach, and I can't remember what scholar was changed to Abednego, right? Their names was changed because I am in control of you, right? That's you have allegiance to me, and that's showing everybody around that you're in allegiance with Babylon, the Babylonians. Now you're in allegiance with me because I changed your name. You wouldn't have been able to be where you at unless I did, right? So you who you are because I am who I am. So you don't forget that. If you ever looked at the very first episode of the Cosby Show, the plot, Bill Cosby made a comment to Theo, I brought you into this world, and I'll take you out. That was the very first episode of the Cosby Show, right? So Nebuchadnezzar is telling Zedekiah, I put you in this position, and I can take you out of that position. Hence why I believe so many people are afraid of Donald Trump because they feel like he put them in that position. And right? But so they're trying to put an allegiance to somebody that is running the country into the ground. But he made that oath with Nebuchadnezzar, right? And that oath he made was in God's name, right? So you better be careful when you make an oath in God's name, right? Because if you allow if that oath you made in God's name is for a corrupt leader, right? You made it in God's name, so you better honor that oath. All right. And in Zedekiah's case, Zedekiah is, I believe, a case study for what we see in Revelations in the lukewarm church. All right. Zedekiah was trying to play both sides of the fence. He wanted to be in allegiance with Nebuchadnezzar when it fitted him. But he also went and asked Jeremiah, what thus says the Lord? And seek God in prayer, but never did what God told him to do. Right? Didn't do what didn't do what Nebuchadnezzar told him to do, because really what Nebuchadnezzar, and it doesn't say exactly what that oath was in the Bible, right? But because we know that Nebuchadnezzar was afraid of Egypt. That was his biggest enemy, right? And because of that, he wanted to make sure that Israelites or Judah at that time didn't form an alliance with Egypt. So the best way to keep that from happening, I put somebody on the throne there that has an alliance with me, right? I shouldn't say it this way, but I'm going to say it. The best way I could make sure the United States form an alliance with me as Russia, I put somebody on the throne. And I help somebody become president that has an alliance and not other countries. Hence why, and that's just me saying, this ain't theological. This is just my thought, military-wise and all of that, why Trump is always forming an alliance with Putin. Right? So that's just but back to this. So we see that. So we have to ask the question, because we got to make this personal. Who's changing my name? Is it the devil or the enemy, or is it Christ? Right? Because we were all supposed to be made brand new when we confess Christ, right? Because Jesus changed from this moment. You'll be known as Peter. Jesus changed people's names. God changed Abram to Abraham, Sarah to Sarah, right? Who's changing your name? Who are you forming an allegiance with? Are you just trying to straddle both sides of the fence? What are you doing to make sure history doesn't repeat itself? Right? It has to be a personal thing. What are you doing? You knew what your ancestors went through. So what are you doing to make sure people after you don't go through what your ancestors went through? Right? What are you doing to prevent the New Age slavery? What are you doing to prevent the New Age destruction? The only thing I can control is here. What I do, right? So what am I doing to make sure I'm not Zedekiah, right? What am I making sure that I'm doing that I'm not a J.D. Vance, to say one thing, then do another. I was watching a debate, old debate, when I don't think it was Mark Rubio. It was Ted Cruz, I think, was talking about Donald Trump in the debate and how he would destroy the country with tariffs, right? But now you support him in everything you do, right? You playing both sides of the fence. So whose side are you on, right? But also in this something else that we have to think about with Zedekiah. You can run, but you can't hide, right? And this is the first thing that caught my attention, right? Jeremiah revealed to him what thus says the Lord, right? And he tried to run from it, right? But not only, watch this, he didn't run towards Babylon, right? He ran toward Egypt, right? He ran toward the very place that he made an allegiance that he wouldn't go to, right? And watch this. I tore with this one. Do we realize the same place the Lord delivered us from and blesses us at can be the same place we get cursed at? It could be if we're being disobedient to God's word, the same place we were being blessed at is the same place we could be cursed at. But also, I could take it a little further and say a lot of the times we're running back to old blessings, but we can't run back to old blessings with new disobedience. All right. He was trying to go back and cross over the Jordan, maybe not in the same place, but in the same area that his ancestors crossed over from Egypt, right? And that's where he was destroyed at, right? The last king was destroyed at the same place that the Lord brought him over. So we have to be careful, right? It is good to go back and know where we come from. It is good to know so history won't repeat itself. But the problem is we're still trying to stay in a place where we're trying to get 40 acres and a mule, and we ain't doing what it's supposed to take to even get them 40 acres, right? We're trying to go back to make people pay for slavery when we are not being faithful over the things that we have right now. Mm-hmm. So we're being disobedient now and expecting the Lord to change something back then. The Lord said, I ain't got to change it back then because I've already delivered the people from Israel, and you keep trying to go back to Egypt. While you keep trying to go back to something that I've already delivered you from, what I need you to realize is when you're facing a situation now, remember what I did back then. I don't need you to go back to that. I just need you to remember what I did and know that I got you now, right? But we're so caught up on what the church did in 1968. We still trying to make Martin Luther King come alive again and have another dream. We're still talking about why and who and when that Malcolm X was assassinated. Yes, we want to know, right? But what is it going to change? Right? Yeah, it may allow family to get closure, right? But that's the family, right? You still got something else to do. I'm getting closure to their family, right? What you had to do with it, right? Because you don't even know any of the Malcolm X speeches. You don't even know what he fought for. You just know he got killed, and it was a conspiracy, and you're a conspiracy theorist, all right? And I brought that up because new evidence that came out with a letter from the police that was conspired, you know. But what I want to get at as I finish up, when we look at Zedekiah, let's get back to that. When we look at him, we can learn from his actions. I'm not going to even say his mistakes, right? Because the Lord used him, right, for us today, right? We can learn from his actions. So let us this week, and we have to go back and study him and study all of that, not just what it's saying in 2 Kings, but you have to go back and look at the Chronicles. You have to go and look at what Ezekiel said. Look at who Zedekiah was. Sometimes when we go through lessons, we need to compare ourselves to the people in the lesson And not just one person, right? Because there's different lenses that everybody is looking through it, right? You got Zedekiah, you got Nebuchadnezzar, you got you got Jeremiah, you got Zedekiah's sons that are not even mentioned, right? You got the palace guards that are not even mentioned. So a lot of the times when, and this is something I have to try to do, and this is what the Lord revealed to me, just sitting there, even with my preaching, as I'm always tweaking how I'm preaching, to look at it through the lenses of one of the people, right? Don't just look at it through the lenses of Jeremiah. Don't look at it through the lens of, Jesus or Isaiah. Sometimes you got to look at it through the lenses of the people that are not doing so right. Because you may align more with Zedekiah than you will with Jeremiah, right? You may align more with a Saul than you do Paul, or Saul than David, right? So let's, since we're focusing on Zedekiah, look at the way the life you're living now, and compare it to a Zedekiah then, and see which way you need to be moving. Not walking his footsteps, not saying he was wrong here, wrong there, right? Because that ain't what you're doing. You're just seeing which line are you walking. Am I walking in his footsteps? Because if you're walking in his footsteps, you know you need to deviate from his plan, right? And then get back closer to the Lord. So just this week, just take an account of your stewardship as it compares to Zedekiah. It's back into it.
Okay. Pastor made all the announcements.
All of the announcements that I have that I can think of course, Monday, tomorrow, trustee, 7:30 on Zoom. I will send out that link tonight and tomorrow. It shouldn't be that long, some stuff to discuss. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we start our Harvest Week Revival. Tuesday night, 7:30, evangelist / pastor gathers. Wednesday night, Charlotte gathers. Wednesday night, Elder Chester Davis. Thursday night, Elder Pastor Paxton Rogers. And prayerfully spirit filled, so pray for a spirit filled on time. And Saturday we have the Harvest Fall Festival. And Sunday, I was gonna do a full Harvest Day program, but we're just gonna do regular service. And we're just asking people to come. The overalls are dressed down, however you want to come. And we're gonna continue to build.
Wednesday. What Sunday? Thursday. Yeah. Next one.
Yeah. That's all I have.
Veterans Day is Tuesday.
Veterans Day.
But it's what time start? 2 o'clock in Zion Fair out in the parking lot.
I thought they said 1.
1 o'clock. Okay, 1 o'clock.
One. I was gonna say, with Central and Eastern Standard.
1 o'clock. Let us all stand for Church School Creed and benedictions. I believe I am
the church school must grow and grow. And I must make a top priority to make it so. Every Christian, every representative. We need not be ashamed. We ask in Jesus' name. We have studied, we have learned. So till our next time together, study God's word. May the rich blessings reside with you, and may the great eternally yours. Amen.